Good evening. I'd like to call the January 2nd, 2018 Davie County Commissioners meeting to order. With that said, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2018. So, this time, if you would join me in the invocation. Dear God, as we come before you this evening, we're so grateful for the many blessings of life. Thank you that we're in 2018. We thank you that we're able for self-governance. And we're just so blessed to be able to live in the United States and Davie County. As we go through this meeting this evening, we ask for your wisdom and guidance. In your name, amen. Amen. You stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. The agenda is approved. Public comment period. Mr. Vogler, do we have anyone signed up?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have anyone who signed up for public comment tonight.
All right. Okay, at this time we'll move to staff recognitions. Mr. Eller.
Chairman, there are a few staff tonight that I'd like to recommend and commend for the work that they've done. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say how proud we are of all of our staff here in Davie County. But we do have a few acknowledgments that I feel are very worthwhile and worth noting today. We have Jerry Myers, who's retiring with 30 years from the county. I want to thank Jerry for his service, and also note that on the 9th of January, we'll be having a reception from him 3 to 5 p.m. here in the chamber. Talked to him earlier today. It's been a busy day with the weather like it is, so I appreciate what he and all of our responders do at this time of year, whether we're dealing with the seasonal issues or not. But we honor Jerry, and we'll be acknowledging that those years of service here in the next few days. I also want to acknowledge two persons that you'll see on your consent agenda tonight, and that's Vicki Fields and Brian Diggs. I know the sheriff would concur with us on this. His request, you'll see some retirement of weapons and arms on your agenda tonight for them. Ms. Fields retires with 20 years of service to the county. Mr. Diggs with 25 years of service to the county. So, Sheriff, we appreciate their commitment to Davie County as well. Also want to recognize Ms. Jane McAllister. Jane waves, we can see you over there. She's been employed with us for 15 years, but Jane just had a great honor. And for those of you who know her, she would never do this on her own. So we asked her to be here tonight so we could formally give her a round of applause for being named the North Carolina Librarian of the Year for the state of North Carolina, which I think is a great honor. And we appreciate, Jane, all you've done for Davie County and our library, not just our library, but being a steward in this great community of ours. So thank you. I also want to recognize two other staff who are in our presence tonight, and that's Kim Harris and Paris Whitley, who tonight also have anniversaries. They both started at the same time for the county, I think 10 years ago. Is that right? Okay, and 668. So Paris and Kim both led our United Way campaign, and if, commissioners, if you recall, our goal was $10,000, and we exceeded that goal. $10,794.51. So this could not have happened without the work of Paris and Kim, and just like Jane, they're very humble ladies, and we felt it fitting tonight to also congratulate not only them for leading our campaign this year, but also for all the staff in Davie County for going the extra mile in this year's United Way campaign to help serve many individuals in our counties who otherwise wouldn't be served through the agencies that are funded through United Way that serve those in need. So Paris and Kim, thank you for your commitment to Davie County as well. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We'll to all the employees that received recognition, certainly worthy, and we don't say it enough to our employees, but thank you for all you do. So, couldn't do it without you, so thank you very much. Next, we have several presentations. The first one is kind of an update on the project we've been working on here in the county, the space study presentation, the space study needs. So at this time, I'll call on Cindy Hendricks.
Good evening, thank you for letting us be here tonight, and I would like to introduce the folks from Mostly Architects. They're the group out of Charlotte that we chose to conduct our space needs assessment. So tonight I have with me Dan Mace, who's the principal in charge and the project architect, and Chris Judy, who is the project manager for our downtown space study. We've been working with them for about 6 months, them and their staff, and they've been a great help to us and have enlightened us on the things. So I'm going to let everyone you know.
Thank you, Cindy. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Manager, appreciate the opportunity to give you a kind of a brief synopsis of, as Cindy said, 6 months of hard work. So it's hard to do. We've got a stack of information this tall. We're not going to go through and read it to you, but we're going to try to be brief and just cover the highlights with you of our study and where it stands right now. Make sure I do this right. There we go. Our objectives and our tasks that we were challenged to achieve were to perform a space study for Davie County, all the countywide facilities with a 20-year projected growth factor for all your needs. So we not only looked at your current needs, but also projected those needs out, anticipating future growth in the county of those individual stakeholder groups. We looked at projecting those needs based on current operations of those facilities, population projections, and changing operational trends in each of those stakeholder groups as well. We also were challenged to look at the existing facilities and assess those architecturally. We had our engineers come out, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, structural engineers, and assess those condition, usability, and life cycle of your existing facilities as well, and make recommendations as to whether or not to maintain those buildings, continue to maintain those buildings, or replace those facilities. We then developed construction and renovation options, including cost estimates to aid the county in prioritizing the future projects. Our methodology was to meet with each of the department representatives individually to identify their priorities and needs. We had a questionnaire that we've developed for each type of facility that a county would have, and we shared those with the stakeholders. They filled them out. We then had personal one-on-one interviews with them. That was a rather long process because we wanted to do those back to back. And so it was like a 3-day exercise to cover all the county facility groups. But it allows us to, when we do them back to back, it allows us to kind of start developing a mental picture of what the county needs, where the largest needs are, and helps us to prioritize those. It is somewhat of a game of three-dimensional chess when you look at needs, because some phasing needs to happen in order to accomplish those things, moving the pieces around. So from those interviews, we then developed a program document, what us architects basically call a program, but it's a series of spaces, individual spaces, size of spaces, relationships of those spaces, and we develop those needs as well. And we look at current needs and then project those out in 5-year increments out to the 20-year time. Our crystal ball gets somewhat cloudy out at 20 years, as most people, but usually 10 to 15 years we can get a pretty clear idea of what's needed, and we just project those out forward from that. We then assess the program with the county manager and the individual stakeholder groups to identify the opportunities to share program space, for instance, like conference spaces, meeting rooms, those sorts of things, So we're not proposing everybody gets, individual spaces, but we look at how we can group those to be efficient. And this is kind of a summary of all those spaces. This is kind of 37 individual stakeholder groups that were interviewed, representing probably close to 27, 28 county facilities that these stakeholders use. And so you can see that at the bottom, your current needs, or current spaces are about 187,132 square feet, and we're projecting a need 20 years out of about 318,700 square feet. So a little bit of growth on the horizon. Chris?
So with those space needs, we brought engineers out to your existing facilities, walked through everywhere, got into mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, crawl spaces, basements, kind of assessing the buildings, everywhere where we could access and be able to kind of determine the condition, determine the systems, determine also the layout and usability of the space, and try to make our best assessment of how those spaces are used now and also how they can be used in the future. So the list here is all of the different buildings and complexes that we looked at. Some of them, you've got the detention center buildings that encompass several buildings that are all together in one site. Some of them are individual buildings that are listed there. And out of that, we determined that as we look to prioritize projects for the future for the county, there's sort of three main criteria. And these are not necessarily one takes precedence over the other. They're all important in their own way to start looking at addressing. One being the building condition. Are there structural issues? Is there water infiltration, leaks, that kind of thing in the building? Are the building systems in good shape? Or do you need some kind of upgrade or update to keep them running smoothly and efficiently? Operational needs, is the building secure? Do you need current codes? Is it accessible for the public? You have several buildings that are public buildings that you don't have an elevator access to get between floors and stuff like that. So those are sort of some of the questions that we're looking at there. And then growth, just going back to the space need numbers, determining in 15, 20 years, what is this office that is comfortably accommodated in one building now may not be able to be comfortably accommodated in the future. So how do we plan for that growth going forward? So this is just to kind of give a little bit of an idea of some of the spaces that we looked at, looking at spaces that, in some cases there's some cracking in masonry, water infiltration, some of the kind of concrete deterioration. All of this is not unusual to see on buildings, especially, some of the buildings like the courthouse that we're looking at are over 100 years old. So just some of the condition issues in the buildings are sort of typical of buildings of that age. Looking at operational concerns, security issues. That top image there is a holding cell, and it was originally an office, so it's not built to function in the way that it's currently functioning. So we look at spaces that are, could be designed to fit the modern operation of a courthouse or a detention center or whichever facility that we're assessing. And also things like accessibility, can you get comfortably into, if you're someone who has mobility issues, can you get into a witness box, can you get into a jury box? Can you egress out of the building safely, those kind of things. And from the departmental growth, kind of two of the big things that we heard are office space, providing enough space for people, but also storage space. There's always a need for storage space. So you see like the image on the left there, that's a toilet that's being used for just general storage. And so we try to identify those situations where there's a definite need for storage space in buildings throughout the county. So we ended up identifying 4 main priority projects for the county. The first being the detention center and law enforcement center. Right now, the sheriff's office is spread out over several buildings. And some are at the detention center, some are over here, some are elsewhere in the county. So identifying a solution that would consolidate all of their operations, make things much more efficient, make them more effective at their jobs, and also a detention center that would accommodate the growth of the detention population. One thing that we see a lot is that sometimes there's a number of beds that you have, but you can't fill those beds because you can't put male inmates with females and that kind of thing. So having enough house units and beds where you can properly classify inmates and stuff like that is a critical part of compliance. Another issue is currently you are outsourcing your kitchen and laundry facilities, and that's something you can bring back into the county and save some money on your cost per meal. Another project that we identified as a priority is human services, and that would be your social services department, health department, those types of departments, and those would, whether or not the human services groups are consolidated or not, there are still advantages to consolidating those groups within the buildings. Your user groups are often a lot of the same people who are using those different services. You also have some of those sub-departments, like your social services, that are currently spread over several buildings. So again, it's kind of same situations with the sheriff's office, where bringing all of those different disparate groups from that one department into a single building helps them operate more efficiently. Another priority project that we identified was the public library. This would be a fairly straightforward project to accomplish, and it tends to be a popular win with the community. This would help strengthen the library's mission and expand a little bit of the program space to allow more use for youth and children, and kind of diversify what the library is able to do. And it would basically be infilling the current courtyard that's a little bit underutilized, so that's kind of this would create a better use of that space. And then the fourth priority project is the courthouse. There's a lot of, with these projects that we're looking at, there's a lot of pieces that have to move. For one piece to happen, you need to move other people into a new space. So this would be placed much later than some of the other pieces that we're looking at, but in looking at some of the current operation of the courthouse, there's a lot of areas that can operate more efficiently. This layout consolidates the clerk's department. Again, we're looking at trying to consolidate people together as much as possible so that they can work more efficiently together. This also would create a much more secure court. You'd be able to separate your judges from your inmates from the public. One thing that we hear in a lot of courthouse projects, especially older ones, is the concern about mistrials based on too many people mixing together, contaminating jurors or contaminating witnesses, and that's one of the things that we look at as we try to look at separating people out in those facilities. This is the second floor and the basement of that same courthouse plan. And it looks at accommodating probation and juvenile crews, as well as repurposing the current Superior courtroom. It's kind of landlocked. You can't really create a modern courtroom that has all the required privacy and security concerns there. So looking at reusing that as a jury assembly and meeting space. So some of the other projects that were also discussed, we looked at, as we've said, all different kinds of departments, all different buildings within the county. And we can't possibly go into detail about each one here, but hitting some of the highlights of food management facility that would enable the county to maintain more of its own vehicles and provide large storage is a definite need that we identified. The Dodge building and enlarging the conference room, getting a little bit more space for them to operate, and separating some of the lobby space so that you have two kind of disparate user groups and share a lobby there. Adding vehicle storage to the EMS main station. There's currently some apparatus that sits on site now that is out in the elements, and that would be a potential way to enclose those in. Thunder Drive is a kind of, that's where the New Horizons building was until recently, and that's a building that could potentially be a new ag building. Then the Brock Community Center, kind of far down the road in the future, keeping the auditorium and the gym, which are good buildings, but looking at potentially reworking that community center to make it be a little bit more of an efficient building. So once we started to look at the cost of some of these projects, you can sort of see the court would be about 19 million, human services about 14, detention expansion renovation would be about 12.9 million, and the law enforcement would be about 8.5. And these are probable cost statements based on a very kind of broad spectrum kind of look at some of these projects. So they are, you know, as you start to kind of hone down the projects, it'll get more exact, and you'll look at kind of the escalation over the years to determine exactly what the cost might look like. So from a summary, we will follow up this presentation with a document that will include all of our supporting information. It will include all of our space needs programs, what the questionnaire looked like, all of those different documents that will kind of explain in deeper detail what we're looking at. And that document will be used to help the county plan and prioritize projects for the future, with the understanding that none of these projects are, or all of these projects are not intended to be funded at the same time. That you would look at staggering the funding and look at looking at staggering funding over time.
Are there any questions that you have of us at this point, or we would welcome any input that you have, so we can finalize the document accordingly. But we've got a fairly detailed draft that Chris mentioned to you, and we were challenged. Your manager said when we got started, we didn't want to make a nice bookend. We wanted a working document that the county could use and follow based upon your priorities and your ability to pay for these types of capital needs over time. So we certainly invested a lot of time with these guys, and we really appreciate all the hard work. Like I said, I can't reinforce how much Cindy was a huge help to us to really schedule it, keep the ball moving, and she was invaluable. And commended for her efforts on this study. So.
Anybody got any questions for Dan or Chris? Well, thank you for all your work. This is tremendous data that we need as we try to figure out what's going to be the ultimate priority and what we can afford. So thank you, and we will be back in touch. John, do you have anything?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I just want to say, as our presenters noted, first of all, I just need to brag on them. They've done a fabulous job in working with all of us throughout this process, as well as Cindy being our quarterback on this. But we all are well aware that there's more needs than our ability to fund in the first 5, 10, or even 15 years. So what this does, though, exactly what has been reported to you, is it gives us a roadmap to think through as we try to prioritize our capital improvement plan, every year. And we will do that, I think, now in a more informed way, because we have more information now than we had when we started. So by no means is this work done. It's an ongoing living process as we go into our budget process every year and renew our capital improvement plan every year. So this will be a continual revisiting of this. But now we have information we didn't have before. So I want to thank them for what they've done for us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Right, the next presentation is, we get to hear about an exciting project that's coming up in Bermuda Run, a sports complex, so I will call on Mr. Eller.
Mr. Chairman, we have Jessica Barber with us today. Jessica, you can come on up and get ready. She is going to present, again, as our chairman said, an exciting opportunity before us, a sports complex that those of us who've been involved with economic development have heard about. And also something tonight that Jessica Barber will be talking about as it relates to Carolina athletic performance. So you'll hear a presentation here and see some diagrams about what is being proposed. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Barber.
Hi, thank you guys for allowing us to be here tonight and hearing our presentation. My name is Jessica Barber, and I'm one of the owners. I have my husband Adam Barber and our partner Jason Teterow. We are all Carolina Athletic Performance. So what I'm going to do tonight is give you a little bit of a brief overview of what it is that we are, what we do, and then let you guys know where we are with the project and how it's progressing. So what is Carolina Athletic Performance? We're a state-of-the-art sports venue, and if you start thinking about yourself, your family, your extended family, even your neighbors, people in your community, travel sports, athletics, fitness is everywhere, and someone that you know within a 5-person radius is involved in it in some form or fashion. And what we do, we've done this for many years, and we have found that there's very much a lack in not only this area, but North Carolina, in sports facilities and having quality sports facilities. So we said, we'll just put one together. So we want to create a premier destination for travel sports, for training, for rehabilitation, and that post rehab, you know, that connection after you're done with your PT, what do you do after that? So from sporting tournaments to camps, clinics, anything of that nature, all the way up to trade shows and people just needing a space to gather. That is what our facility will be able to provide for the community. So what we're looking at is a 120,000 square foot facility. We're going to be able to have year-round sports. We're going to have 8 full NCAA basketball courts that can be transferred into 16 volleyball courts. Looking at 5 batting cages with rollaway, so you have a full caged infield. We will have 60 yards of indoor turf. Going to have a collegiate level training facility, so that's for any athletes, fitness, anything of that nature, space available for that. 4,000 square foot multi-purpose room. I say multi-purpose room, it could fit 2 wrestling mats, and I'll have a diagram. This could be used, again, like I mentioned, for clinics, for meetings, gatherings, things of that nature, or if you wanted to have a senior fitness class inside of there, you would have that available. And we also have a 10,000 square foot lease space available for rehabilitation. We're looking at partnering with a very well-established rehabilitation in the community and having them come in and leasing that space within the building. So a little bit of where we are in Davie County. We are purchasing 22 acres just behind the BB&T Sports Complex. Just there's a stretch of land behind Kenderton and before you get to the sports complex. And we're going to have 3 entrances. So if you look at that diagram, I wish I had a little laser pointer. I'll go here and show you guys a little better. So we're going to have the entrance kind of retrospect. Over here is Kenderton. This right here is the BB&T Sports Complex. So that way you can kind of see where it is in your mind. We're looking at having an entrance coming from the BB&T Sports Park a fire entrance coming from the back of Kinderton that's only accessible for fire department emergency, and then getting a northern access on the top that would push people back to Yadkin Valley Road. So what our primary access point, what we want to have with that facility is that Yadkin Valley Road. So whenever people are done with our facility, instead of going to the roundabout to Bermuda Run and wanting to turn left, we're wanting to push them back into Davie County on that Yadkin Valley Road, pushing them out in front of where the hospital is. Okay, so that's kind of a bit of where we are on the map. So we're working with Landmark Builders and Fuller Architect, and John has given us some really great 3D images of proposed entrance. So we've got, imagine this one huge building, and then that front section of the building is conventional, and that's where we're going to have that lease space available. So it's a bit separate, so they can have their own operation and own you know, you would have access for an ambulance drop-off, things of that nature on the front of that, as well as a whole nother entrance into the facility to get to basketball tournaments or anything of that nature. So some facility features, things that I mentioned already. So we're going to have locker rooms with showers, fully functioning. Food courts, we're going to have a smoothie bar and looking at possibly adding in a small deli restaurant on there as well. So if you're there for a basketball tournament and you've got an hour and a half to kill, you don't really want to leave the park, you can access food there, or just grab your kids something to eat. Innovative technology, so we're going to try to have everything operating from scheduling to the clocks to all of that, everything ran off of schedules through technology. So you can see very clear who's checking in, who's leaving, who has what reserved during the week, so what organizations need to use the courts. Maybe it's a church league basketball that wants to rent out a couple of courts or things of that nature. We're also going to have a pro shop. We're going to have 9 meeting rooms available. So these will be very flexible space, whether it's from teams needing somewhere to go in between games, they have a place to go and gather. Or again, if someone needed to have some meetings, you could take and divide those 9 rooms and expand them into much larger rooms and combine them. 8 basketball courts that will turn into 16 volleyball courts. 30-foot ceiling clearance, so pretty tall, and then you can accommodate 10 or more different indoor sports within the one facility. So here's a bit of a map, just to explain where it is. So it's just under 120,000 square feet. This right here is that entrance. So again, over here you're looking at the sports complex, the soccer fields. Walking in, here's your lease space for rehabilitation. Its own separate entrance up here at the top. You've got your 8 courts, turf just above that, batting cages in the back, and then the training space right in the middle. So it'll give you a good feel for where things are. And then that's where you've got sort of sprinkled throughout the front entrance of the building. That's where you've got your 9 meeting rooms. On that top middle little square is where your 4,000 square foot multi-purpose room. So again, we've got it drawn two little blocks in there. That represents 2 wrestling mats, size-wise, that could fit inside. So a bit of economic impact. So with this facility being built, and our timeline is looking 2018, it will be built and open. We will be the largest private facility, not only in North Carolina, but on the East Coast. So you're looking at a facility that you're going to draw people not only from all different directions in North Carolina, but you're going to be drawing people from up north coming down and people from the south coming up, because we're centralized, located on the eastern map, as well as centrally located within the state of North Carolina. Some other facilities, and these facilities are called mega sports facilities. There's not a ton of them in the world, but they are out there and they're surviving and doing really great and providing amazing things. So a few places of reference that I wanted to give you guys is Round Rock Sports Center in Round Rock, Texas. It's roughly 83,000 square feet. In just a year and a half, they had 105,000 participants and 180,000 guests visit the facility. So all of those people drawing in, those are outside visitors, not participants, people living in Round Rock. Those are people outside of Round Rock driving in for that, to use that facility for whatever it may be. Another one is in Gatlinburg, just not too far from here, Rocky Top Sports World. It is 86,000 square feet. Their economic goals, they were set at $10 million in their first year of operation, and officials reported 17.5 million impact since they had opened their doors. You're looking at a year and a half that they made 17.5 million. The venues produce more than 44 multi-day events and surpassing their targets by 66%. And another one is Myrtle Beach Sports Center. This is 100,000 square feet, so just a hair less than what we are. And they're generated over $12 million in economic impact to the Myrtle Beach and Grand Strand area. So again, already a very busy and viable area you're looking at, Myrtle Beach, and they're adding on top of that $12 million just in that first year. And they had a goal of $10 million of economic impact, and they've reached that within their first 5 months of operation. So some facilities that are out there that have been built, established, running tournaments, operations to reference. So we bring that back to Davie County. So how will this potential growth affect our community in Davie County? We're going to be drawing in lots of people. So like I mentioned in the very beginning, we're going to turn this into a destination sports park. So located just behind the E&T Park, it's already a destination sports park to come there for soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, any kind of field sports, especially with them adding in their turf fields. And then you add our facility just adjacent to them. So we're not partnered together, but we are going to be working with them and trying to help, facilitate the flow of traffic of people and events that are going on in that area. So we want to turn this into a huge destination community for sports, fitness, wellness, and again, like I mentioned, prime medical services. We want people to think, oh, I want to drive to that facility. I want to go to that area because they're giving me top-notch medical care. They're giving me top-notch fitness, nutrition, anything that's going to benefit and promote your health in your life. And there immediately upon opening, there's going to be a direct need for hotels, restaurants, activities, things to do. So maybe a family is there, they could go on a Friday night, their child has a tournament, and they're not scheduled again to play till Sunday afternoon. So what are they going to do for a whole day? So we want to keep them in Davie County and keep them in that area. So generating, again, more revenue for our community. And then again, that rehab space and comprehensive medical services, this is going to open up a floodgate for secondary offices. So if you have a knee replacement, you're done with your rehab, you're working at post-rehab, well, maybe you need to start looking at chiropractic health, neurology help, things of that nature. It's just going to start trickling from one to the other as far as what a need will go when it comes to medical services. Our development timeline. So in December, we were looking at resolving a sewer and easement issue and closing on the land. Holidays happened and all of that, but we will be closing on the land in the next couple of days. So that is progressing forward. We're looking at, because the almanac is saying it's a super cold winter, we're looking at breaking ground in March of this year. Hopefully sooner if we get a break in the weather and it all of a sudden turns sunny. But the very latest we're looking at March. And then for that whole timeline of building up, we're looking at partnering with the various groups. So again, that well-established rehab facility, as I mentioned, and other groups in the area to partner in with our facility. And looking at having our calendar 75% full by October of 2018. So when we're opening our doors, we're already 75% booked for that first calendar year. Again, I'll leave you guys with another picture of what the facility will look like. You guys have any questions?
Jessica, you guys may have looked at this in terms of the specifics of what a basketball player, an individual brings in terms of net revenue to the community. And we've looked at it at baseball, and I mean, I think it can be $200 to $300 a player that they net into the community, where we don't build schools, we don't build
Yep.
jails.
They're there for a
bringing
weekend
that
and then they're
in.
gone.
Yeah, is that kind of
Yep.
what you guys have seen in
Yes.
terms of the?
Yes, and then the average, so you're looking at, if you're talking in terms of basketball, you're gonna have about 12 kids on a team, then you've got 2 coaches. For travel sports, you're looking at, I would say, probably 10 of those parents traveling with their kids. So there's 2 parents per 10 kids. And then you have, if, say they have a sibling, so maybe factor in 1 sibling or a grandparent or somebody wants to tag along to watch them. But again, depending on what kind of level, and if they're a very high recruit, whatever kind of level of play, again, you're gonna have more. And then for them to stay in that area, you're looking at an economic impact, what do we say, $150 per person is the average of what we found. So from player to their 2 parents, if they have any sibling, so of those 4 people just for that one team, and you're looking at having 8 courts, and how many teams can you turn over, and that's just in a basketball. So then you look at volleyball, you look at things like pickleball, you look at, we're gonna have removable basketball goals and the clock, so that way it will open up the clear space. So if you need to put cheerleading mats, a cheerleading competition will take 2 minutes, so you can turn over the athletes that are going out there at a much faster rate. Same thing as wrestling. The average wrestling match is gonna go super fast. So the amount of kids and the per dollar of the kid for the event, I'm gonna say on average is $150 per person, economic impact. Any other questions?
Looks great, so
Yeah.
look forward to seeing that get going here.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
We gotta, if we're gonna push those people to Yankee Valley Road, stay in Davie County, we've gotta build hotels and restaurants, and it's gonna
Okay,
be a
start.
nice chicken before the egg thing.
Oh, yes, this is your warning. All right, thank you guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, so our next presentation is the review of our 6/30/17 audited financial statements, and call on Ms. West.
Good evening. I've attached the 2017 audited financial statements and compliance reports to the agenda for your review. And tonight we have from Martin Starnes and Associates, our auditors, Marty Spivey, the audit partner.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me some time to come and do this presentation for you tonight. Again, this is the 6/30/2017 year end, so it's kind of a picture of what was happening at the year end. I'm sure you've done many presentations in between that let you know what's going on since then. We have submitted this report to the local government commission. We have not received approval yet. Christmas happens, and it will take a while before they get done. They're averaging, or they have been averaging about 3 weeks to get a report turned around. We have worked with Davie County several years, and one of the things that we always talk about and really enjoy here is we have this very cooperative staff. We've worked with Robin, and we've worked with several different people, and everybody is very gracious and sincere in their effort to get things done and make sure everything is correct. We issued an unmodified opinion in the current year, which just means that you had a clean report. And saying we found no material misstatements in the financials that would lead us to believe that we would be misleading our reader. We'll talk about the different areas of the report, but we're generally going to focus on the general fund itself. There are other funds in between, but the general fund is really what is most closely scrutinized. This picture that you're seeing right here is the general fund revenues and expenditures, but it's excluding other financing sources and uses. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is really what happens almost every year. This is public safety, this is all those other things, but it doesn't include maybe debt financing or some of the other things. For the past 3 years, your revenues have exceeded your expenditures. In the current year, it was about $248,000. Prior year, it was a little over $1 million, but again, we'll talk a bit more about what the changes are. When we look at the total fund balance in the general fund, again, I just said it was $240,000, but with this slide, you'll see that it's about $84,000, and that is because of the transfers, the other financing sources and uses. So in the current year, you had transfers to other funds of about $1.6 million, but you did have installment debt coming in of about $1.2 million. So that's where that difference is. And that transfer was to your capital project funds for some of the projects you had planned. When we talk about fund balance, I know this is an area that is constantly changing in the definitions of what we're looking for. Several years ago, we had the change in fund balance, and now it's net position. So we have these different pieces of net position, excuse me, non-spendable, being things like inventory, prepaids, things that aren't in cash form so they can't be spent. Restricted are things that are external restrictions like grants, any new debt. They can only be spent for the purpose in which the county received that money. When we have your committed, those are the things that the board votes on. Generally, all of your projects, things that are going to last more than a year or two, those are going to be in your committed section of net position. When we get down to the assigned portions, those are things that are generally going to be less than a year. You're going to maybe make a vote that you're going to spend a certain amount of money, but it's going to go pretty quickly. And then the unassigned is the last piece of the net position pie that isn't already accounted for. So I think people might look at that total net position and say, wow, we're doing really good, but then you need to consider some of those things that are already trimmed out of that total dollar amount. We'll continue talking about fund balance and showing that it's in your financial statements, it's really your assets plus your deferred outflows, liabilities, plus your deferred inflows. The deferred pieces are the newest pieces that are only a few years in your financial statements. It hasn't really changed a lot other than they're trying to make sure that when you have revenues and expenditures in the current year, that the only thing that we're reporting on the income statement side is what really applies to the current year. So when we're talking about deferred items, it might be, let's say somebody has prepaid taxes for 2018 and you're still in 2017. They don't want you to count that as a revenue because it really goes for the next year. So that's what that was all about. It's just trying to make it easier for the reader to understand what's truly happening in a current year. Your fund balance position stayed very much similar to the prior year. You didn't have great big fluctuations as far as this particular amount went. We talked again about that available fund balance. That's the fund balance amount that the local government commission uses to compare you to your peers. So that calculation is kind of an accounting calculation. We basically back down stabilization by state statute, which every year can change depending on what your receivables are at year end. So that's a number that can really fluctuate, but that available fund balance, again, is where the local government commission pretty well starts and then starts calculating what is available for spending. In the current year, you'll see, again, it was very similar to last year. It was about 27%. The percentage of fund balance is determined by the board. It is not something that's necessarily dictated by the local government commission. And the local government commission in previous years waited for it to get very low before they would start sending unit letters. What I'm finding is now, if they have questions, you might get a unit letter, whereas before you were probably getting scolded if you had a unit letter. So don't be so surprised if they send you a letter. They might just be asking questions about what are your intentions. If they've noticed a trend that maybe they don't know what's happening and you haven't had to go talk to them, they might just be asking questions. So you can definitely tell by the tone whether they have a strong question or they're just curious about things that are happening. And again, your percentages are very similar to the prior year. With your taxes, this is a slide that shows basically several things put together. It's your ad valorem taxes, your local option sales taxes, and other taxes. This is about a $2.7 million increase from the prior year, about 7%. This is mainly an increase in your ad valorem taxes, but it's also about an $800,000 increase in ad valorem taxes refunded to counties. There had basically been an error in prior years in their cost reporting, and they're giving it back at this point. And just to note, your ad valorem taxes make up about 83% of your current revenues. So that's generally the largest number every year that you're going to see. Your intergovernmental, this is also an increase of about 11% over the prior year. This includes your restricted and unrestricted intergovernmental revenues. So this change basically is an increase in your federal and state grants. When we look at charges for services, this was a pretty large decrease over the prior year, about $500,000, but that was mainly due to the sale of the health fees from the clinic. We'll switch over to expenditures, and if you note, we really only talk about the largest sections of your financial statements. There are other parts in between, but these are the biggest pieces. Your public safety expenditures increased about $1.2 million from the prior year. That's about an 8% increase. This section, though, includes sheriff, inspections, fire. So there are several categories that make up your public safety expenditures. The increases are mainly due to capital outlay in the current year in the sheriff's department and some salary increases, and then fire marshal costs moved from emergency management department to fire department. When we look at your education expenditures, this was also an increase of about $500,000 from the prior year. This is really only about a 4% increase. But this includes your public school current expense, capital outlay, all the pieces that make up your expenditures are in this total. Human services, again, this change is really due to the change in the home health program. And by next year, when we get this put back together again, you'll be able to see much more clearly where your operations really were in those areas. Obviously, having the home health piece taken out kind of skews that, but if we took it out and looked at it, it's pretty well similar to the prior year. I won't talk much about your enterprise fund. Those are just numbers so you can compare what this year was to the last year. You can see in your, flip one page too many, I'm sorry. In your enterprise funds, your revenues over expenditures were about $1.6 million, and then in the solid waste fund, there was a decrease in the current year. And then your cash flows from operations. This is just a slide of what's happening, but it's much easier to see when you get your financial statements, or if you're looking in your financial statements to see what those changes specifically are. One of the big changes that's coming up is this GASB 75, Government Accounting Standards Board Statement 75 is making a big change. This is specifically addressing your other post-employment benefits. This is where you're paying your retiree health benefits. And what we know is that the change is going to be, we think is going to be large, but we haven't seen official information yet on it. What we know is that everything that was estimated, and only a piece of it was recorded in prior years, next year we'll have to record the whole amount. So where it might have been reported 1/5 of what the liability is going to be in your financial statements, now we'll have to show the whole amount. That is really due to a lot of the changes in the, of course, in the OPEB study, but in a lot of places not budgeting enough, or not looking at that full number and not really knowing what that expenditure might be in the future. It is a big change. We think it's going to be a large number, and Kavanaugh is who does your study. Yeah. And what we've done, we've told all of our clients, please get out there in advance, get all your information turned in. Let's see what the numbers are when they roll out. Make sure that the board knows what's going to change. So while we know there's a change, we don't know what that number's gonna be. I feel like I can only say, I know there's gonna be a change, I have no idea what it is, other than I think it'll be pretty large. And what's significant is in your enterprise funds, some of that gets booked to your enterprise fund. So if you have employees in that enterprise fund, that percentage might hit in that fund. Well, it'll be a prior period adjustment in your enterprise fund, it'll be a prior period adjustment because it's a change in accounting principle. We all believe that it's gonna be significant, but until we can start seeing what those numbers are, we can't even tell you, we need to make this change. I know that Deb has already filed, she's already filed her reports. Hopefully she will get them back very quickly, and then we can start estimating and looking to see what that might mean.
Can I ask you a brief question about that? Not being an accountant, what does that, I mean, you say it's significant. Where will we see it? I mean, how will it impact what we look at, what you and Robin and Cindy talk to us about?
One of the first things that you're going to see, probably as soon as you start flipping open a report next year, is that there's a prior period adjustment. So that means that where we might have only estimated a small piece or shown a small piece of what the total expense might be, we're only showing a piece of it now, where they're saying we're gonna change what last year's beginning balance was. So in the current year report, it's very similar to what happened with your LEO, your law enforcement officer's special separation allowance. There's a prior period adjustment to record what they consider to be the full liability. Where I have more concern than in the general fund is in the enterprise funds, because some places have debt covenants that rely on that balance, and when you don't know what that expenditure might be in the current year, it's hard to say I'm gonna meet my debt covenants. I don't know if that's, again, we're dealing with a number that we're unsure of. We just feel very certain that your liability expectations are probably not going to decrease.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's gonna be on the government-wide financial statements for
Okay.
the general fund. So you see them at the
Okay.
beginning ones, but that liability, as I understand it, isn't gonna flow down to the general fund statements. But it will for the water and sewer fund, because we have employees in that enterprise fund, so it will impact those individual fund statements.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The other big change that's coming up is in compliance. We work very closely with the state auditor, and every year, I know that you've heard us talking about the changes, and things are changing again, and there's gonna be new procedures to do. We don't, again, this is another area where we haven't gotten all of the information yet for the 2018 year. We're supposed to meet with the state auditor around the 20th of this month to get final information on what's gonna be expected. One of the things that's changing is on the schedule of federal and state awards. In this current year, we reported all the direct benefits. So Medicaid, TANF, WIC, all these places that have direct benefits were shown in your schedule of federal and state awards. Well, next year, all of that's coming out. What that means for the county is, let's say that, and I'm just gonna use a hypothetical, let's say that in the current year, you had $28 million in federal expenditure, or federal awards. When we take out all that direct benefits, well, as soon as you take out Medicaid, now we're talking a much smaller number. We could be up to $2 million. That changes whereas the auditors have to, we have to look at a certain dollar amount and say, how much do we have to test of that? Well, most places, in Davie County included, we only had to test the Medicaid program because Medicaid dollars were so great. When we get rid of Medicaid direct spending, well, all of a sudden, where last year we had a $2 million threshold, this year in 2018 there'll be $750,000. So we're basically looking at all programs over $750,000 and saying, okay, which do I need to test? So we could have significantly more testing. I did a quick survey before I came in today, and it looks like we'll at least have to test 4 programs next year where we only tested 1. And part of that is we'll have to be in your offices a little bit more testing compliance. Compliance has turned into a really big part of the audit, whereas I would say 5 years ago it was only a fourth of the audit. Now it's more than half of the audit. And it's all about controlling the dollars spent. It's all about making sure that everybody is following compliance rules as closely as possible. not that necessarily the rules have changed, but the focus from the state auditor has really been intensified. So another change that's coming up also is, as part of an agreed upon procedure that is required by the state auditor, your audit group will have to audit Medicaid separately. So although we took out that from your regular audit, it's going to be audited separately. Again, we don't have all the information on exactly what's going to happen, but the state auditor will decide how many selections we make. It's just a huge difference. And if you've been with us, probably 5 years ago, we were able to choose 25 Medicaid selections, and then it went up to 45, and then in the current year, it started at 77, and if we thought that there might be a mistake, it was really 105. So 25, 7 years ago, to 100 in the current year. And now, based on what the state auditor tells us, it could be larger than that.
So accounting fees are going up.
Somehow, I'm sure they will. I feel sure they will. But there's the other procedure, the other thing that the state auditor is requiring isn't even part of the audit. And that's where, to me, more of the confusion is how much is that going to be? Until she tells us per county what needs to be done, we really don't know what that might be. Hopefully not as bad. She had done a study, she had published the results last January, and they went out to, I believe, 11 different counties, large and small, and did a study, and they found an error rate of about 18%. That's pretty high. They found one county that had no errors, but that county did 100% review of every file as they approved benefits. I can't even imagine how much that would cost to do a 100% review. And I don't know, they're not requiring that, they just want there to be some form of review. And they have sent out documentation saying specifically what they expect the counties to do and what DSS program managers are required to turn in quarterly to prove that you're doing what they're asking you now. So much more restriction on those programs now. It's a big, big change. That is it for me, unless there are other questions on that.
So when do you think you'll hear back from the LGC? Excuse me.
I would hope any time now, because they've had it, we've had it a couple of weeks. Yeah. So very soon, and we generally don't have a lot of comments or questions on our information from the LGC.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Spivey? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, next we have a public hearing on the Northeast Davie Sewer District System Development Fees. Mr. Lambert.
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you again for your time. We're in here tonight to follow up on some system development fees. Elaine with Raftels is here, and we have met all of the general statute regulations, 161 Article 8 for the system development fees. They have been posted for 45 days on our website. We run some ads in the papers. We received no comments at all back from any of those, from it being out there. So once again, in the system development fees, there's two options in this. Option one is to do the system of development fees by meter size, or continue to do it by the 2T rules. Staff recommends that you continue to do it by the 2T rules. They have been posted. No comments, and we're here today for Ed to open up the public hearing. Unless there's questions, if there's any questions.
I have one thing to add, Mr. Chairman, before we open up that. Any development that requests that have come in our way, what we've been doing is being very transparent about what the state's requiring by statute to occur by June 30th. We can't anticipate that the General Assembly will make any more changes between now and then. What I am proud to say is that thanks to Mitch and Elaine's help and Mr. Lambert's help, we are definitely ahead of most in our planning for this. we can all attest to that. We're seeing things on our listserv and hearing from other counties. So I want just to assure you, your staff are way ahead of the curve of most in our preparation and planning for this effort, and it couldn't have happened without all the work we put into this. But I will also say that we also don't know if other changes are coming forth, and because of that, we would propose that we look to a June 30th implementation date of these proposed policies for that reason. But also, what we're doing as development requests come in is we're telling them what the pre and post amounts would look like, because we want them to know that. That may help a developer determine whether they want to do the project now or later, but also what those associated 2T costs that Mr. Lambert referred to as we apply the litmus test for the North Carolina general statute. So this is well thought through, not only from the policy perspective as it relates to our utilities, but also from these development fees. So we thank both of our consultants and Mr. Lambert for that. So we're very confident that this will achieve what we want.
So any questions for Mr. Lambert or Mitch or Elaine? All right. This is a public hearing, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
Now is the time where the commissioners open a public hearing for comments on proposed changes of the Northeast Davie Sewer District System Development fees. I would ask all who wish to comment at this public hearing come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then make any comments.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is John Jones, and I would just like to have a little bit more clarification because I've seen no posting of any of these changes. I guess we missed it, and for nobody to have any questions on what the fees or administrative costs would be, I guess, ridiculous. I mean, so you posted it where? Just on the website, and then what paper?
We actually posted it in the Davie County Enterprise.
Okay.
It was posted that they were going to be available on the website at a certain date.
At a certain date?
Yes, and they were.
So they're not available now?
They have been taken off as of the 45-day mark.
So there was a posting of how much the fees were going to be for everybody?
That's correct.
Okay. And so are those available at this time?
Not on the website, but we can make them.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's all I would want to know is just what that is, so we can get updated. I know a lot of people, just like to keep updated on it and probably miss that. And that's why they're not here and we don't know. So I think that it'd be nice, so my suggestion would be to make sure that we post that again or get it out there for the public. So that's the only question I have. And the only comment that I have is I think you guys have done an excellent job of getting this project through and getting it where it needs to be, but I think some people just need to know what we're looking at expectation-wise for fees and how those are developed, because the 2T, I'm not sure what that means.
Johnny, you want to speak to that?
So if you could just spend a couple seconds on that, I'll
Yeah,
get it.
And before you get into that, no, come on. How long were they on the website?
They were on for 45 days.
45 days. Okay.
And we were not required to post it in the Davie County Enterprise, but we did post it that they were available online for some people who don't go online, that just read the newspapers. So we did post it in the newspaper that it was available online, and it was there for 45 days for a statute that we have to keep.
Thank you.
And we'd be
The 2T
happy,
rules-
before you start, Mr. Lambert, we'd be happy tonight after you decide what to do to put that on our website and refer people back to it in case that 45-day period was missed. But Mr. Lambert can definitely explain the general statutes and the 2T rule.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. The 2T rules are state mandated, what we go by in utilities. Their flow, they basically give us the flow numbers for each business. They tell us what we use. They have to be used for design for, we've seen one earlier today for the sports complex. We use the 2T rules and we got flow allocations for design for that. So they're available on the Diener website. And it's kind of like the go-to book for all utilities.
Johnny, I think one thing needs to be stated here. What we're talking about here is not individual rates. We're talking about rates for developers, that kind of thing. So.
That's right. And I'll read something here quick. System development fees are defined as one-time charges assessed against new development as a way to recover share of the cost of capital facilities, construction to provide services, capacity for new customers connecting to the water or wastewater utility systems. But we're only doing this for the Eastern Davie system. This does not include water.
Is that clear as that? I thought it was for each individual homeowner.
Okay. That's what I thought might be the question.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just for clarification's sake, thank you for speaking tonight. Every county in North Carolina has to determine what they're going to do regarding these development fees between now and June 30th, which is why we're talking about it tonight. And we also did some fiscal policies on top of that. So.
Anyone else wish to come forward? Seeing no other coming forward to comment, I would now turn the public hearing back over to the board chair, closing the public hearing comment section of this public hearing, providing the board the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take in this matter, and as to what effective date you wish for any action to be taken as to the Northeast Davie Sewer District System Development Fee.
Any comments, questions from the board? All right. Well, first of all, declare the public hearing closed. Sorry. Any questions or? All right. I would entertain a motion to on the Northeast Davie Sewer District System Development Fees, either to approve or whatever your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion to approve the staff recommendation to use the 2T, if that's the proper.
Just in clarification for an effective date of June 30th,
Yes.
2018.
Yes.
Okay. Have a motion on the floor to adopt the fees as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That carries 5-0. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda. Anybody have any issues with what's been presented there? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Have a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your hand. That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, next we have the county manager's report. Mr. Eller.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, since I know we had 3 presentations tonight and a few other items of business. Just want to congratulate Brian Bird on his appointment as Emergency Management Coordinator. Jerry snuck out on me a minute ago. He snuck in and snuck out, so I couldn't thank him again. But Brian has been sworn in and will serve us well and has Jerry's confidence to step right in and serve in his absence post-retirement. So Brian, thank you. We're happy to have you serve in that capacity with us. And with that, Mr. Chairman, just to mention one other thing before I turn it back over is the sports complex presentation that was presented tonight. That sewer allocation request was on consent, so I'm sure they'll be appreciative of your passing that as part of consent. We didn't note that when they were presenting, but that's all for me.
Thank you. Next, we move to old business. One item this evening, the utility policy and cap fee. Mr. Lambert.
Good evening. The cap fees we've already taken care of, so now we're here for the utility financial policies. And that financial policies, if you remember Mitch went over this 10-minute quick down and dirty. So what this financial policy says is we'll have a minimum debt service at 1.50, and depending on what the board votes tonight, we will continue and Mitch will draft that policy for financial reasons. And it'll keep a minimum days of cash on hand of 360 days of cash on hand with 100%. We're following the same route that the general fund followed with their financial policies as the utility fund, so we'll have the same set of standards that they will have on both funds, general and But that's what this is, and if there's any questions, we've got Mitch here.
And he has his book too.
Yeah, that's right, and he's got his book, so.
Happy to go through it again.
The only question I have is, and Robin may answer this, Johnny, and you don't even need to get up, is this anticipation of the accounting change, I think she emphasized that it was gonna, we would see it more in the utility fund. This won't affect any of what we're doing here in terms of
No,
bottom
it
line
will
type
not.
things?
This
Okay.
is what we're talking about is anticipation of funding the sewer system we're talking about.
Okay. So, but in terms of reserves, this change in accounting is not gonna impact that
It
at
should
all?
not. It should
Okay.
impact it minimally,
Okay.
I would say.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then I'd like to mention before we go any further about the rate increases of the 2.5%. So that's also in, it will be in this policy that the board, that utilities will not have to come to the board. It will be in the budget for 2.5%. If it goes above that or below that, or above that, then you'll have to come to the board for approval.
Similar to our sewer allocation policy that you recently passed, if it's over a certain threshold, we'll come before you. That gives us the ability, as most utilities have from year to year, to make adjustments as needed within a certain approved threshold. And I think all of you have seen that presentation back in November, I believe. So I think it's sound financial principles to get us ready for the future and for the growth we're going to experience.
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, I know.
No,
I
it's
talk a
okay.
lot.
We love having you, Mitch.
The GASB 75,
She's gone.
the GASB 75, I think is more of a balance sheet issue. What we're talking about here is cash flows. I think it's going to be a one-time, I guess I shouldn't say balance sheet, it's more of just, it's an accounting standard to book a liability. What we're talking about here in terms of debt service coverage is truly cash flow, operating revenues, operating expenditures. GASB 75 may have an impact on our calculation of debt service coverage in the first year, but going forward, it'll be very minimal after that. So no issues there. And then related to any revenue bond covenants that the auditor referenced earlier, you do not have any revenue bonds outstanding, so that piece of it will have no impact on you whatsoever.
And the policy says 30%. Anything above 3%, I'm not to give up to that.
Any questions for Mr. Lambert or anybody else?
I've got a question for Mr. Eller, if I can, please. Well, probably be several people answer, but
I can answer if not.
we see our fund balance numbers up here on the screen tonight. How does that compare to what our policy is as far as requiring a minimum fund balance? And will these changes affect that?
I'll definitely defer to Robin and Mitch, but what I'll say is that percentage, the 25% threshold that we have, which is a healthy percentage to have as far as the fiscal policy goes. And what we're talking about is really enterprise fund reinvestment, but I'll let Ms. West.
Right, what we're talking about right now is for the enterprise, the water and sewer enterprise fund. So it's separate and apart from the general fund. But you are correct, we do have a fund balance policy from the general fund that we approved several years ago now of 25%. And you saw from the previous slides that we're now around 27, a little above 27%, so that's good. So what we're talking about implementing now is for the water and sewer fund, similar type policies. They don't have a fund balance per se, but the measure, the standard of measure is days of cash on hand. So that's what we're asking for approval for tonight.
Okay.
But
And you may have seen the auditor, revenues over expenditures in the enterprise fund was about 1.6 million. That'll help boost up your fund balance. But last year you were at about 225%. The policy we're talking about is 100% at 360 days. So you're well above the policy threshold now. You have plenty of room there, and you have some flexibility to choose what you want to do.
Good, because I'm sure this board certainly wants to keep a healthy economy in our government.
And Mr. Poindexter, one thing that we we talked about in November, but also among our consultants and Robin and Johnny as well, is that we want to make sure as we grow, as development comes in the county, we grow in a smart way. So by having these thresholds, we'll be able to reinvest the money that we have in that fund to be able to grow instead of tapping into other sources or impacting our general fund. So these are two separate funds, think of them like that, but we're very healthy in that regard. So this will help our future growth in Davie County.
This policy also depletes our fund balance some as we start reinvesting in infrastructure through the county and fixing some of the issues that we have. 64 is, one that we've done out of operation budget, 400,000. That actually moves that with this, that we'll be spending $500,000 a year in upgrades in the system. So until we get capital plan that John and Mr. Meadwell working on and utilities aligned with that, we'll be doing smaller projects around the county that you've all been hit with before, Peoples Creek Road, 64, and places like that. So that will also help, strengthen the infrastructure in Davie County.
It's always a good idea, I feel, to keep extra balance in case we have our economic developer here tonight, in case he brings us in a project or whatever, we have some buffer zone to work with.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, anybody got any other questions for Mr. Lambert? Okay. All right, so this is a business item. So entertain a motion to adopt the utility policy and the cap fee, meaning the amount we can increase without it coming back before this board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Poindexter made the motion, Mr. Ferguson seconded. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor raise your hand. Okay, that does pass 5-0. Thank you. All right, we do have one item of new business tonight, another opportunity, and we'll ask Terry Brawley, the chairman of the Economic Development Commission, to come forward and talk to us about this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks for the nice setup there. I think all of you know, if you went out in Davie County today and tried to find square footage to rent, there are really no vacant buildings in Davie County at all. 90% of all the new companies that are looking for buildings, they want an existing building that's out there because they typically need to be in operation within about 90 days. We need to do everything that we can to enhance our ability to grow those spec buildings and help the private sector be partners for us. I know Mr. Holland's working a great partner for us. We have one building that's going up right now. It's 108,000 square feet. I have 4 people looking at that building right now. Been talking to other developers. There is an opportunity here if we could. I think some of you are familiar with the term red leg. We have worked with Energy United before in terms of loans that are out there that are available to towns and counties. And what I'm really doing tonight is seeking permission and support for a red leg loan to be submitted to Energy United that could help us and help a developer possibly with $1 million loan over a 10-year period of time, enhance our ability to grow more spec buildings. And this time the buildings might be bigger, because what we've seen with projects is 100,000 square foot is really an entry point. We're seeing larger requests come in. So we have identified that developer, and we'd love to seek your permission to be a co-applicant with the town of Moxville for $1 million red leg. And then that process might take 6 to 9 months to get through if we're funded, if federal money is out there. And then if we were to be awarded, then Ed and John get to go to work on all the legal ease and that sort of thing to protect the public in the process after that. But I'd be happy to answer any questions or seek guidance in terms of where we go from here. If you're comfortable, I'd be happy to move forward with an application, a co-application on your behalf.
Just for the record, there would be, we would have a collateral position or a clawback provision here, just for the record.
And the developer would pay back. We're not asking the county and the town to make those payments.
Mr. Chairman, one thing, just point of clarification. First of all, thank you, Mr. Brawley, for sticking around for this long. I know that the EDC board has been apprised of what we're talking about here. We do hope to partner with the town of Moxville on this 10-year payback that would occur by the developer. But also, just to make note, we'll have to defer to Mr. Vogler as the public hearing requirements for this, because there is a two-part process. One is giving EDC the permission to proceed, and I've drafted in your packet a proposal letter to Energy United on that behalf, because the red leg goes through the utility provider. So that letter's already been drafted. But then in addition to that, a resolution has to be passed by the board and associated public hearing as well, before the formal process can take place. So, I have to defer to Mr. Vogler whether this is a one-step or two-step or three-step process here. As Mr. Brawley said, we just want to help make this economic development process as easy as we can.
And we would be able to move forward with the letter itself. The resolution would need to have a public hearing first, which we could advertise and put on in our February meeting. And then at that point in time, we would also hopefully know who the developer was and be able to enter into a written agreement that we could also pass at that time, that you could give the county manager approval to enter into it as long as it was substantially similar to what we presented at the February meeting. And obviously those things sometimes take time to work through all the legalese with their counsel. But then at that point in time, if we move forward and Red Leg, we were able to get the loan, and it would be a zero interest loan, then at that point in time, we could make certain that the county was secure either through a irrevocable letter of credit for that full $1 million, and or even a deed of trust on the property that we could subrogate to the rights of banks and so forth. So we were second or third down on the list, but have plenty of security there. We could do that.
So, Mr. Chairman, you need a motion for the letter? Do we need a motion for the resolution?
Not the resolution at this time. The resolution needs to be after a public hearing, since it is an economic development project type issue.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and make that motion that we send the letter supporting the Red Leg application. And I just want to say this, being on the EDC board with the chairman, I think Robert has served on that board also. It is a pleasure to work with that group of people, with you, Terry, and this, I know we're all family pretty much here now, but this, the partnerships that we have with the private sector are unparalleled in the state of North Carolina. No, you can speak to this better than I can, but I think there are very few counties that have what we have in terms of what you've cultivated with Mr. Hollingsworth and now with this new developer.
No question at all. I mean, the potential at Hollingsworth alone is probably over 600,000 square foot. This other developer could put you well over 1 million square feet out there. There's not another rural county out there in North Carolina that has that kind of product. And a lot of urban counties don't. There's just very little product that's left on the market today out that way. And if this Toyota plant hits, and everybody talks about us in the paper out there, is it North Carolina or Alabama? That supply chain's already out there looking in this area.
And I think, Commissioners, to Mr. Brawley's point, this really does give us a true competitive advantage having speculative buildings. Some counties don't have that flexibility, and so the fact that Mr. Brawley and EDC in conjunction with our county is willing to do that, I think really does truly put us in a great position for competitiveness in North Carolina.
So I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Have a motion to issue the letter of support for the Red Leg. Have a second.
Second.
Mr. Wise Carver seconds that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the support.
And then we'll need to put a notice in the paper and have a public hearing in February.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brawley. All righty. We move to Commissioners' comments. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, make it brief, but I do want to say this. Davie County lost 2 stars in the last 30 days. Jack Ward was my dad's baseball, basketball, and football coach at Cooley High School. It was his first job. And then he was my principal, probably along with a bunch of us here. He was principal at the high school when I was down there. So just a tremendous man, and gave a lot to the county, and we're going to miss him. And up in Richard's community, Bud Hooser, former county commissioner, outstanding citizen, and they will both be missed. And I'm sure there are others, but those 2 come to mind. And then I just want to thank our staff for being here. You guys that come to this meeting every month, appreciate you advocating for the people that work with you and work under you and work alongside you. And especially thank our law enforcement, our EMS, and our fire folks. We don't say thank you enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Robert.
Just like to wish everybody a happy new year. And again, just just go on what John said, to these Jerry Myers and all these people that he mentioned earlier. Just congratulations on the job well done, and just wish them the best of luck on whatever they pursue after this. And like Mark said, Bud Hooser and Jack Ward both, great loss to our community. And just continue to remember everybody this season right now. A lot of flu going around, and it's affecting, seems like everybody. So just watch where you're going. And I happened to be up at the hospital the other night with one of my employees, and a lot of people coming there sick. So I was trying to stay away and just watch myself. Every time I get around a bunch of people, I get a little queasy in my stomach. Oh Lord, I'm getting sick. But just watch yourself and take care of yourself. And I appreciate our staff and what all they do, and just a timeless job that they continue to, push forth and do a great job. So that's it.
Thanks. Mr. Poindexter.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know a lot of the people have left, but I'd like to say a special congratulations to Jane McAllister from the library. I know she pours her heart and soul into the library and the goings-on out there. And I'd like to thank Jerry Myers, too, and, of course, Kim and Paris, and those retiring from the Sheriff's Department. They've done a wonderful job for Davie County, as has all our staff, all the people sitting in the back room, all the people that work with them. Hope y'all have a very, very good new year. Thank you.
Well, I would like to echo the same thing. This is very important, I think, this time of year when our emergency people are out. And don't make any difference if it's 0 or if it's 90 degrees out there, they're always ready, willing, and able to come take care of us. And that is a very, very important thing. Our utility people, they're going to have frozen water pipes. You're going to be out there working on them. And all of our employees, people don't realize what goes on in this county and what they do. It is a tremendous amount of responsibility and a tremendous amount of work to do. And I like to thank them all every day. And I would also like to thank the people who don't come out to these meetings, but they sometimes watch us on TV. And I like to thank them for spending the time to see what's going on in their community and what's going on in their county. Thank you.
I would reiterate everything or echo everything that's been said up here this evening. For all the people that came out, I'm especially always thankful when you come out, but tonight when it's 10 degrees, I'm really appreciative, so thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.